At 14:47 hours on July 7th, 1944, Sergeant Curtis Culin stood in a Norman field 4 kilometers inland from Omaha Beach, watching a Sherman M4A1 burn. The tank had tried to cross a hedgerow. It had climbed the earthen bank at a 35-degree angle, exposed its belly armor, 12.7 millimeters thick, to a German Panzerfaust team hiding in the adjacent field. The shaped charge had penetrated the fuel tank. 3 men got out. 2 did not. Culin was 29 years old, Troop A, 102nd Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron, attached to the 2nd Armored Division. Former truck driver from Cranford, New Jersey, 0 engineering degrees. The men from West Point had been trying to solve the hedgerow problem for 31 days. Explosives took too long and announced the attack point. Bulldozer tanks, M1 Dozer Shermans, existed at a ratio of 1 per 40 tanks, and their hydraulic mechanisms broke under sustained fire. The bocage hedgerows were not fences. They were earthen walls built during the Roman occupation, reinforced over 800 years by oak and hawthorn roots that had fused the soil into something closer to concrete than dirt. Each field in Normandy was a fortress 100 meters square. American tanks were dying at a rate of 14 per day in this sector alone. The Germans called it Verteidigungsterrain, defense terrain. They had been preparing ambush positions since 1943. Culin walked back toward the beach that evening. His unit had been rotating rear area patrols while the infantry ground forward at a cost of 2,000 casualties per mile. He passed the obstacles the Germans had planted on Omaha Beach to stop landing craft, steel I-beams welded into X-shaped structures. The army called them Czech hedgehogs, Czech Enigel in German. Each one weighed approximately 90 kilograms and stood 1.2 meters tall. Industrial-grade steel, 6 centimeters thick. Culin stopped walking. He looked at the hedgehog. Then he looked back toward the hedgerows. If you want to see how a New Jersey truck driver's observation of enemy beach obstacles defeated the most fortified agricultural terrain in Europe, hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten battlefield innovations like this. And please subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Culin. The bocage covered 90% of the Cotentin Peninsula. Fields averaged 100 by 100 meters. Each field was surrounded by an earthen dike 1.2 to 1.8 meters high, topped with vegetation that raised the visual barrier to 4 meters. The dikes had been constructed by Norman farmers over centuries to mark property boundaries and contain livestock. Hawthorn, oak, and blackthorn had grown into the earthworks for 800 years. Archaeological surveys would later confirm root systems extending 3 meters deep. When a Sherman attempted to cross these barriers, basic physics created a tactical disaster. The tank climbed the dike. The front raised 30 to 40 degrees. The underside armor, the weakest point on any tank, became exposed to German anti-tank weapons positioned in the adjacent field. The main gun pointed skyward, unable to engage targets. The tank became a stationary target for 3 to 7 seconds during the crossing. German Panzerjäger teams with Panzerfausts could penetrate 200 millimeters of armor at 60 meters. Sherman belly armor was 12.7 to 25 millimeters. Between June 6th and July 10th, 1944, American forces had advanced 20 miles from the beaches. They had suffered an estimated 40,000 casualties. The rate was 2,000 casualties per mile. The 79th Infantry Division lost 1 man every 3 meters during the fight for Montgardon. The Germans were not attacking. They were waiting behind hedgerows with Panzerfaust's MG-42 machine guns. and patience. Army engineers tried several solutions. Explosive charges could blow gaps in the hedgerows, but placement required 15 to 20 minutes under fire, and the explosion announced the attack axis to every German within 800 meters. Bangalore torpedoes worked, but required infantry engineers to crawl within 10 meters of enemy positions. The M1 Dozer Sherman, a standard tank fitted with a bulldozer blade, could push through hedgerows, but only 60 such vehicles existed across the entire beachhead. The hydraulic lift mechanism broke frequently. Replacement parts took 3 weeks to arrive from England. A parallel effort emerged from an engineer officer who designed something called the Douglas cutter, a complex serrated blade that required machine shop fabrication. Production time per unit, 18 hours. Number of machine shops in Normandy, 4. Curtis Culin had no formal engineering training. He had worked as a truck driver in New Jersey before the war. He knew how to weld because his father had worked in a rail yard. He had joined the New Jersey National Guard in 1940, been federalized in 1941, and trained as a cavalry scout. The 102nd Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron operated M8 Greyhound armored cars and M5 Stuart light tanks for screening and patrol work. Cullin's job was to repair vehicles when they broke, which happened frequently. On the evening of July 12, 1944, Culin was sitting in a maintenance tent with other NCOs from his troop. They were discussing the hedgerow problem. One soldier, a private named Roberts, said something as a joke. "Why don't we just put some saw teeth on the front and cut through the damn things?" Culin did not laugh. He asked how much steel they would need. The Czech hedgehogs on Omaha Beach were constructed from German steel. Each obstacle consisted of 3 I-beams welded at 60-degree angles to form a tripod structure designed to rip open the hulls of landing craft. The beams were 1.8 meters long and 6 centimeters thick. The steel was industrial grade, manufactured in German plants from Lorraine iron ore. After June 6th, the obstacles became irrelevant. They sat on the beach rusting. Culin walked back to Omaha Beach on the morning of July 13th. He measured one of the hedgehogs. He calculated that 4 prongs cut from a single obstacle would provide approximately 90 centimeters of length per prong. He discussed the concept with his unit's mechanics. The idea was not to cut through the hedgerow, but to plow through it. The prongs would dig into the base of the earthen dike where the roots were densest. The forward momentum of the tank would rip the section free while keeping the tank level. They cut their first prototype on July 13th using an acetylene torch. 4 prongs, each 75 centimeters long, welded to the toe plate and lower glacis of an M4A1 Sherman. The welds were crude. The prongs angled slightly upward at 15 degrees. Total weight of the modification, approximately 180 kilograms. Cullin's unit commander, Captain James DeBolt, authorized an unofficial test. At 1100 hours on July 13th, a Sherman with Cullin's attachment approached a hedgerow 1.5 meters high. The tank accelerated to 15 kilometers per hour. The prongs struck the base of the dike. The tank did not climb. It plowed forward. The earthen wall erupted in a spray of dirt, roots, and vegetation. The tank emerged on the opposite side 7 seconds later. The main gun had remained level throughout. The front of the tank was covered in torn vegetation and mud. Instant camouflage. DeBolt reported the success to higher command. Word reached General Walter M. Robertson, commander of the 2nd Infantry Division, who was operating in close coordination with the 2nd Armored Division. Robertson requested a demonstration for 1st Army Command. At 14:30 hours on July 14, 1944, A Sherman, equipped with Culin's device, performed a demonstration in a field near Saint-Jean-de-Dey. The audience included Lieutenant General Omar Bradley, commander of 1st Army. The Sherman crossed 3 hedgerows in succession. Each crossing took between 4 and 8 seconds. A standard Sherman, operated for comparison, required engineer support and 6 minutes to cross a single hedgerow under simulated combat conditions. Bradley asked who had designed the device. He was told it was a sergeant from a cavalry reconnaissance unit. Bradley asked if the sergeant was present. Culin was brought forward. Bradley asked him where the steel had come from. Culin explained. German beach obstacles. Bradley asked how many could be built. Culin said as many as there was steel available. Bradley issued verbal orders that evening. Every Czech hedgehog on every invasion beach was to be collected and transported inland. Every Ordnance Battalion in the beachhead was to begin cutting and welding. Priority, absolute. Timeline, immediate. The device was designated the Culin Hedgerow Cutter. Bradley called it the Rhino because the prongs resembled a rhinoceros horn. The order went out at 0600 hours on July 15, 1944. The 177th Ordnance Battalion received primary responsibility for production. Supporting units included the 17th Ordnance Battalion and attached engineer companies from the 2nd and 3rd Armoured Divisions. The target date for Operation Cobra, the planned breakout offensive, was July 20th, later postponed to July 25th due to weather. Production teams worked in shifts. Acetylene torches cut I-beams into sections. Arc welders worked through the night. Each Rhino cutter required approximately 3 hours of labour to fabricate and install. The steel came from 2,400 Czech hedgehogs collected from Omaha, Utah, Gold, Juneau and Sword beaches. Additional steel came from destroyed German bunkers and pillboxes. The design evolved during production. Initial prototypes used 4 prongs. Later versions standardized at 4 prongs with reinforced welds. Some units added 6 prongs for extra digging capacity. The angle of the prongs was adjusted to 10 degrees upward to optimize penetration depth. Weight distribution was calculated to avoid throwing off the Sherman's already nose-heavy balance. Between July 15th and July 24th, Ordnance battalions installed Rhino cutters on approximately 500 to 600 Sherman tanks. This represented 60% of the M4 Shermans in the 2nd Armoured Division and 3rd Armoured Division. Additional units, including the 1st Infantry Division and 9th Infantry Division tank battalions, received smaller quantities. Production continued even after Cobra began. No blueprints existed. Fabrication was based on verbal descriptions and measurements taken from Culin's original prototype. Variations occurred between units. Some tanks had prongs 60 centimeters long, others had prongs 90 centimeters long. The principle remained constant. Dig into the base, plow through, stay level. German intelligence detected unusual activity around American tank formations, but did not identify the modifications. Luftwaffe reconnaissance had been suppressed by Allied air superiority. German observation posts reported increased welding activity behind American lines, but attributed it to routine maintenance. On July 24th, General Bradley briefed division commanders on the operational plan for Cobra. The offensive would begin with a carpet bombing of German positions west of the Saint-Lô-Perrier road. Infantry and armour would exploit the breach. The Rhino-equipped tanks were to be held in reserve until the breakthrough phase. Their purpose was not to attack fortified positions, but to exploit open terrain by moving through hedgerows at speed, bypassing German strongpoints and collapsing defensive lines from the flanks. Weather delayed the operation by 24 hours. The carpet bombing finally occurred on July 25th at 1100 hours. 1,500 heavy bombers dropped 3,300 tons of ordnance on the rectangular area 7,000 by 2,500 meters. Some bombs fell short and killed 111 American soldiers, including Lieutenant General Leslie McNair. The German Panzer Lehr Division holding that sector suffered approximately 1,000 casualties in 45 minutes. The division's command structure collapsed. At 1300 hours, American infantry began advancing. Resistance was sporadic. By 1600 hours, lead elements reported gaps in the German line. At 1700 hours, the 2nd Armored Division received orders to commit. The Rhino tanks went to work. The 2nd Armored Division, known as Hell on Wheels, moved out at 1730 hours on July 25th. Combat Command A and Combat Command B advanced on parallel axes. Each combat command consisted of tank battalions, armored infantry battalions, and supporting artillery. The lead tanks were Rhinos. German defensive doctrine in the bocage relied on pre-sighted positions along roads and known crossing points. Anti-tank guns covered intersections. Infantry with Panzerfausts hid in hedgerows adjacent to predicted tank routes. Machine gun nests covered likely infantry approaches. The plan assumed American tanks would move slowly, road-bound, vulnerable to ambush. The Rhino tanks did not follow roads. They moved through fields. At 1752 hours, a platoon from the 66th Armored Regiment approached a hedgerow 1.6 meters high. The lead Sherman accelerated. The prongs bit into the earthen dike. The tank burst through in 6 seconds. The trailing tanks followed. The platoon crossed 4 fields in 3 minutes, emerging 400 meters behind a German PaK-40 anti-tank gun position that had been oriented to cover a road intersection. The German crew heard the tanks coming from the wrong direction. They attempted to reposition the gun. American infantry shot them before they could complete the turn. This sequence repeated across the entire breakthrough sector. German strongpoints found themselves flanked or bypassed. Panzerfaust teams positioned along roads engaged nothing. The American tanks appeared in fields, moving laterally through terrain the Germans had considered impassable for armor. At 20:30 hours on July 25th, lead elements of the 2nd Armored Division reached Cannacy, 7 kilometers beyond the start line. By midnight, forward patrols had penetrated 11 kilometers. The German 7th Army headquarters received fragmented reports of American tanks appearing everywhere, but could not establish a coherent defensive line. July 26th. The 2nd Armored Division advanced 16 kilometers. German attempts to establish blocking positions failed because American tanks simply bypassed strongpoints by moving through adjacent fields. Combat Command B destroyed 14 German tanks and 48 trucks in a running engagement near Le Mesnil-Hermin. German forces attempted to retreat, but found American armor already behind them. July 27th. The 3rd Armored Division joined the exploitation. Rhino-equipped tanks from the 33rd Armored Regiment overran the supply depot of the 2nd SS Panzer Division near Notre-Dame-de-Cenis. The depot contained 200,000 litres of fuel and ammunition for 12 artillery battalions. German engineers attempted to destroy the supplies, but were overrun before demolitions could be completed. July 28th. Forward elements of the 2nd Armored Division reached Coutances, 32 kilometers from the start line. The German 84th Corps, attempting to retreat through Coutances, found the town already occupied by American armor. The Corps commander ordered units to abandon vehicles and escape on foot. American forces captured or destroyed 64 German tanks, 538 other vehicles, and 7,370 German soldiers over the next 48 hours. July 29th. Resistance collapsed along the entire front. The German 7th Army ordered a general withdrawal to the Seine River, 150 kilometers east. The withdrawal turned into a rout. Allied fighter bombers strafed retreating columns. The Rhino tanks moved faster than German forces could retreat. By July 31st, American forces had advanced 60 kilometers. The bocage campaign was over. The race for Paris had begun. The 2nd Armored Division suffered 914 casualties during Operation Cobra. This included killed, wounded, and missing. The division destroyed or captured German equipment at a ratio of 38-1. From July 25th to July 31st, 6 days, the division inflicted an estimated 10,000 German casualties and destroyed or captured 100 tanks and 250 other vehicles. Before the Rhino, American forces had suffered 40,000 casualties to advance 20 miles through the bocage. The rate was 2,000 casualties per mile. If Operation Cobra had required the same casualty ratio to reach Avranches, 50 miles south, the expected cost would have been 100,000 American casualties. Actual casualties during Cobra across all units involved, approximately 4,000. The difference, 96,000, represents the number of American soldiers who were not killed or wounded because Curtis Culin had looked at a German beach obstacle and seen a solution. The German response came too late. On July 30th, Panzer Lehr Division commander Fritz Bayerlein filed a report to 7th Army headquarters. The report stated, "American tanks are appearing in terrain we assessed as impassable for armor. They are not following roads. They are moving through fields at speed. Our anti-tank defenses are oriented incorrectly. Request immediate tactical reassessment." The reassessment never came. The German 7th Army was in full retreat by the time the report reached headquarters. Curtis Culin received the Legion of Merit in November 1944. The citation credited him with an invention that restored offensive armored mobility to U.S. forces in restricted terrain. The Legion of Merit was typically reserved for field-grade officers, majors, colonels, generals. A sergeant receiving it was extraordinary. Culin did not survive the war unscathed. In November 1944, during the Battle of Hürtgen Forest, he stepped on a German S-mine. The mine detonated. Shrapnel severed his left leg below the knee. He survived the amputation and returned to the United States in early 1945. He lived in New Jersey after the war. He died in 1963 at age 48 from heart complications. The Culin Hedgerow Cutter was never formally adopted into U.S. Army doctrine. It was a field expedient modification specific to the Normandy hedgerows. After the breakout from Normandy, bocage terrain no longer posed a threat. The Rhino attachments were removed from most tanks by September 1944 to reduce weight and improve speed on open roads. But the concept survived. Modern armoured doctrine includes breaching vehicles designed to clear obstacles under fire. The M1150 assault breacher vehicle, a modified M1 Abrams tank, uses a plow attachment to clear mines and obstacles. The plow design traces directly to Culin's principle. Use the tank's mass and momentum to plow through rather than climb over. The National Armour and Cavalry Museum at Fort Moore, Georgia, displays a restored Sherman tank with a Culin Hedgerow Cutter. The placard describes the device and names Curtis Culin. Most visitors do not stop. It looks like welded scrap metal, which is what it was. But for 6 days in July 1944, that welded scrap metal changed the outcome of the war in Western Europe. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor, hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten battlefield innovations from dusty archives every single day. Stories about soldiers who solved impossible problems with simple tools. Real people, real ingenuity. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia? Our community stretches across the entire world. You're not just a viewer, you're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served in World War II. Just let us know you're here. The hedgerows of Normandy are still there. French farmers still use the same field boundaries their ancestors built 800 years ago. Some of the hedgerows near Saint-Jean-de-Dey still have scars from 1944. Tank tracks that tore through the earth and never quite healed. Curtis Culin never became famous. His name does not appear in most histories of World War II. The Rhino tanks get a paragraph in some books, a footnote in others. But the men of the 2nd Armored Division knew, the men of the 3rd Armored Division knew, the 96,000 American soldiers who did not become casualties in the bocage never knew Curtis Cullin's name. But they lived because he had looked at a piece of German steel and seen something nobody else saw. Thank you for watching. Thank you for remembering. These men deserve more than silence.